Right, so you've just had a completely scuffed expansion, you're hard at work on the next one. Your team has ended up burning the candle at both ends for ages, so ultimately you just need more time. But buying more time will just result in a massive content drought for the game. You're Blizzard, what do you do? Well, actually, I think Blizzard has an answer to this problem. A more robust answer than they have ever had for an end of expansion period. And I think it's one that might even hint towards the future. For the first time in a very long time, every raid in Shadowlands will matter. And that's a pretty wild thing to say. Blizzard have billed what they're going to do here as a, quote, fresh take on what a season of WoW might include. So this isn't just a random last patch effort, it's them experimenting. So there's a lot to read into because Season 4 of Shadowlands is going to be very different, and patch 9.2.5 has a few pretty interesting things in it. Speaking of pretty interesting things, by the way, here's our March Patreon loot. Stuff's awesome. I mean, come on, Hunter class card, big Kraken pin, art's awesome, and yes, so that's all great. Patrons, there's also a decently chunky update on everything down below because we've been very busy behind the scenes. Okay, let's go and let's talk about Season 4. Shadowlands is going to have a fourth season. It's not going to have a new major content patch, but there will just be a fourth season. Now, the idea of splitting what would usually be a mammoth last patch season into two, that's already been done with PvP in the past, so I think this is a neat enough idea. Now, you may think to yourself, boo, seriously, you're just going to scale the numbers up and have us do all the same shit again for nothing? Thankfully, no, that's not happening. They're going to be making material changes to both Mythic Plus and raiding. Raids first, because the raid situation is more wacky. They are adding a progenitor-themed affix system, or something like that, that will, they say, infuse some new mechanical twists into Nathria's Sanctum and Sepulchre. They're also going to increase the difficulty, as well as the loot drops, meaning that, I mean, yeah, we're just going to have one season worth of, the item level bracket moving up, and every raid? So we're going to have a truly massive selection of fights to do as raiders. Now, I've always been a, clear and then go do something else situation as a raider. We just don't do months of farming, and I think that means that for a lot of people, like, say, how my lot raid, going back to an old raid, like, we won't have tired ourselves out on them. So that's actually pretty nice. But for me, the really big question here is affixes. If you asked me to do a raid fight with Volcanic activated, then I would say that I'm going to book a flight to Irvine, and I invite the rest of you as well because we're forming a picket line. I think the likes of that and Storming just suck, right? Like, I don't think they add anything interesting. They're like the swirlies in Kingsmore and Hungers. They serve no interesting purpose other than to frustrate the player and just add some annoying texture to the actual interesting mechanic you're engaging with. And then, I suppose, where Mythic Plus is actually fun, well, I think that's when the designed mechanics for each boss and trash pack actually matter, and then when there's a good seasonal affix. So if you apply those lessons to raids, then how the hell do we actually do good affixes for a raid? Now, because the likes of Storming and Volcanic and stuff like that would just be awful in a raiding setting, I don't think they'll do that. The only thing that could work is Kiss Curse style stuff. So, instead of random frustration things, maybe spawn in some sort of damage taken and dealt increase pool that you can stand in. Maybe go greedy for speed, greedy for speed in a farm night, who knows. Whatever these are, though, they'll have to work well on loads of different bosses. And that just makes me think that, could they be going into bosses and just adding a little progenitor-themed mechanic, like here and there, sprinkling them across the raids, rather than do, like, massive affixes? Or maybe they just have a few affixes, but they apply them differently between the different raids and the different bosses. I'm not really that sure. I've just got a feeling that this is going to be a cool but messy experiment. No doubt, though, some bosses are going to come out really well from this. Others, I think, will just feel annoying. I think we all understand what it's like when you're in a WoW raid fight and you've got the interesting, cool mechanics for the boss, and then they just throw in a random swirly to avoid, and it's like, ugh. Focus on the main thing. Come on, let's just make the main mechanic more interesting instead of just random swirlies that we're already bored of. So, I don't know. I just don't think that those incidental M+ affixes will work at all. I think realistically, Just the style of those is completely unfeasible. Perhaps something inspired by the seasonal affixes where, there's a bit of a challenge, but also a positive aspect. Maybe that will work. Optional risk-reward stuff. Or maybe even reward only, like a second heroism, but counter that by maybe a boss having a harder damage check phase. Because, think about something like Raging. That wouldn't work on a boss. Imagine what that would do to Sludge Fist. So it's weird. To be clear, though, I do broadly love what this means. It means that they're being smart with what they've got. They're trying to make each raid relevant within a patch, and I think that is good. Now, the ability to do 31 bosses in a week, that's madness. And that cannot be a requirement. So this is going to be a big test of just how much we're almost willing to, go wild with reward systems and ruin the game for ourselves. Because it's quite tricky, because that means that us ruining the game for ourselves, well, if that's incentivized by the reward system, then that's the designers creating a game that promotes an unsustainable play pattern, so how the hell do you get that right? Maybe the success of grindy games like Lost Ark has them just willing to throw content out and let us handle the rest. I don't know. We're not going to get like 10, 20, 30 bosses for the Great Vault, so I wouldn't worry too much. I just wonder how it's going to work. But anyway. At a high level, we have long been super frustrated at how irrelevant raids get so quickly, and how you play the patch, not the expansion, and how the game doesn't always feel like it's expanding. It kind of feels like it's getting a bit smaller, right? Because you're just kind of like tunneling in the patches. This season's changing that. I'm excited for that, and if this is a principle learned for the future, then that is fantastic. The question, though, is just the affixes. What, do you have more affixes as you go up the raid difficulty levels? Does each raid have its own progenitor affix? That could maybe work a bit more. Maybe a raid is active in 1 week with the affix with better loot. Who knows? But let's move on to Mythic Plus, where they're also doing interesting things. And Plus is seeing utterly massive changes, and I love this. Okay, the dungeon pool is changing, and it's doing so in a strange way. 2 dungeons from each of the last 4 expansions. Yeah, that's what they're doing. Now, my read of their wording here is that means that the base Shadowlands dungeons are not going to be a part of Season 4, which I think would make sense because by the time Season 4 launches, people will have been running like Tyrna Scythe for 2 years. So what we're going to have in the new season is the 2 wings of Tazavesh, the 2 wings of Mechagon, the 2 wings of Karazhan, and then 2 Warlords of Draenor dungeons of our choice. This is certainly brave. This is what... assuming I'm reading their wording correctly, this is a near full, dungeon swap for a season. And that's a risk. And I like them taking risks, because they've played it safe for too long, so I really applaud this. WoW hasn't innovated, it's not spiced things up truly, this is new and different. At least something like this will change up the game properly, and also make use of content they've already made, but we would still like to play. Now, those WoD dungeons are on a poll, and this is where clearly I'm in the minority, because I fucking want Skyreach, man! I want Skyreach. Skyreach is such a cool dungeon, and it could be quite hard on a Mythic Plus, but that's kind of why I want it. I thought it had cool bosses. I thought it was really fun. Same goes for Shadowmoon Burial Grounds. Man, I love the boss designs there. And Auchindoun. I really like Auchindoun. WoD had some brilliant dungeons, so I'm very happy the Grimrail's almost certainly going to be there. But Iron Docks, though? Really? Why do people like Iron Docks so much? It's got nice voice acting, I suppose, but it's just a big flat, lots of trash, and then some bosses that aren't that interesting. Anyway, it's good that we're getting it. There's no word on what an affix, like a seasonal one, will look like here, but overall, gotta say, I am so down for this. I've enjoyed Mythic Plus a decent amount recently. So seeing these older dungeons in a way that I haven't done them, especially Warlords of Draenor, that will be novel. And as for why Blizzard are doing all of the mega dungeons this season, I think it's pretty obvious. They definitely have got less player participation than the other ones. Even right now, loads of people I know are just avoiding Tazavesh because they're scared. So that'll throw people into some new content, right? So this sure as hell beats doing even more Tyrna Scythe runs for yet another Unbound Changeling, doesn't it? I just think it's interesting. So overall, Season 4 then. That's what's up. For the PvPers, you are getting another Vicious mount and, new gear and all of that, but no fundamental changes. I do know loads of people want a rating from Solo Shuffle, so I think if this is an experimental patch, why not throw some rating in Solo Shuffle and maybe let people get gear from it? Like the good gear. Why not? Overall, though, this is brilliant. The last thing that WoW needs is another bloody busted expansion. So if having a hit squad of developers just go and do something interesting here, if that buys the rest of the team a bunch of time to do things right, then that is good. In any other time, we'd be stuck here with nothing. The only thing that would keep WoW in your mind would be the beta and like streamers getting access to the beta and that kind of thing. That's one of the reasons why the beta was always so good for WoW's marketing. Even when the game felt a bit dead, the beta would keep it in your mind. But at least this time, when the 10.0 beta comes out, you'll sort of have a novel way to play the game. So this basically seems as good as they can do, but what could it mean? For the future then, first, this shows they're willing to experiment, which is great. Second, they're clearly experimenting with World of Warcraft being a broader game. Raiding across the whole expansion, dungeons across a few expansions, affixes and raids. I mean, could they somehow, keep a previous raid tier alive during a patch cycle? How many bosses is too many? How do you balance raid loot in a world like this? I mean, those are all hard problems, and it's great that they're trying to tackle them. I mean, what if older raids were closer to a modern one, but dropped better gear, such that you could just do quick runs of past tiers to gear people up? Or perhaps you go through the FF14 option of taking some things off a loot lockout so you could just turbo get someone geared up? I don't know, what ideas do you have? Could they extend this back? I know I would love to go and do Throne of Thunder for current relevant loot with my friends, because I love Throne of Thunder. Why not? So Blizzard said that this is a take at look at what a fresh take of a season could actually include. So I really do read this as season 1 of the next expansion. Well, maybe not season 1, because that'll be all the new stuff, but I at least read this as seasons being different. Even thinking about Dungeon Pool for Mythic Plus, what are the implications? Will it always be 8+2, with the older ones being phased in and out, and an expansion's mega dungeons coming in for the back half? I mean, who knows? But then also, I think there's a clear read that this is them trying to keep the game fresh. And why? Well, I think it's because 10.0 may not be that soon. It's going to be revealed April 19th. Now, reveal to launch tends to be 10 months, maybe 12. That would put it at February, which of course would be 12 months after patch 9.2. 2 seasons to cover a year, or even a 14-month-ish period, that's pretty much par. And if these affixes can be fun and the rating can be sort of revitalized there and people enjoy the Legacy Mythic Plus, then yeah, this will probably do a better job of retaining players than normal. But also, MMOs are just more competitive now. ESO's doing well. Guild Wars 2 just had an expansion. FF14 is extremely strong. And during this period of WoW being a bit in the downtrend, it's just going to have a patch every 4 months, and that'll be that. Oh yeah, Lost Ark. It also has its numbers. So perhaps all of this competition is actually making Blizzard step up and try to innovate, and this is what we're seeing. Anyway, it's not just this, because 9.2.5 is also in the PTR. So in addition to the cross-faction support and an updated renowned catch-up to 60, 9.2.5 also has a few new mounts. The Blood Elves and the Dark Iron Dwarves seem to have continuations of their heritage armor quests that each come with a mount, perhaps. So that's quite neat. And there's also data mine maps that point to a partially recovered Tirisfal Glades. There's also some rumblings around the Galakron's Fall map being updated to remove Galakron's bones. What could that mean? Dragon Isles expansion, many cogs are turning. There's also some Blood Knight armor and some unused Dark Iron weapons. So hopefully they make it in. There's also a few textures that are raising eyebrows as well, some new Kalia stuff, some things that are leading people to speculate the Dark Ranger customizations could come in, and I think generally, because there's just quite a lot of Northern Lordaeron, Quel'Thalas stuff, people just wondering, will there be a Northern Lordaeron Dragon Isles expansion? What's going on? So lots of cogs are turning. We'll probably just have to see what future builds have. Now, to something far more immediate, I do have to mention the Mage Tower. They've announced it's going to be permanent as of March 29th. Obviously, we then just say, why wasn't it always like this? They didn't say. I mean, obviously, they initially intended this just to be more things for Legion Time Walking. But I've got to assume that for some technical reason, I don't know, it was maybe tied to the Time Walking event, perhaps such that they couldn't easily, remove it from the Mythic Plus? I mean, who really knows, to be honest, with the Mage Tower? There's likely some sort of reason why they didn't just say, okay, we're not going to take it away, we'll just let it go forever. There's got to be some reason, right? Maybe they just stuck to their guns and it was only in the time after that that they realized, hey, what the hell are we doing? But anyway, would it be nicer for them to have just said this was their intent earlier? Because the way they did it just kind of left a bunch of players feeling like they were just talking into the void. But this is a good change, so I will take it. I think the march progress is slow, but between 9.1.5, 9.2, and 9.2.5, we are seeing a continual upward trend. I think for me, though, like, the narrative has been really rubbish. Some of the in-game stuff's been nice, but the broad story's been pretty shitty. You know, and the overall, like, design of the game is just so clunky in terms of rewards and all of that. Beyond those things, I've been enjoying my time in patch 9.2, so hopefully, you know, the time extension bought by all of these changes, hopefully that results in an expansion not being full of design holes. I mean, just today, right, and just because I use the Slick Ice Legendary and the slots that works on, I now have to read craft because I just got my tier legs in the Great Vault. That's going to cost me a ton of gold. And, you know, God forbid I want to have a few other different legendaries that are on different slots and swap between them. Matt's in a similarly scuffed situation with, you know, stuff in his spec. And it's just that thing where Shadowlands is such a cobbled together mess of throwaway systems. Like the idea that, you know, they have legendary armor in the game, they have tier sets, and just like how domination sockets clashed with the legendaries, now the tier clashes with the legendaries. And like, yeah, okay, there's legendary scrapper, but it costs so much money for good legendaries. So it's just wild. And this just makes me, you know, take a big huff and maybe have some hopium that if they have enough time for this expansion, they'll be able to think the bloody thing through. Because it seems like we've just been in a scramble for the last 4 years. Like, everything has been behind. Like, nothing has had iteration time. And it's just screwed us all up. So hopefully this extended season will buy us a little bit of a reset. Okay, that's my take on things. This is all good news for World of Warcraft. And it is so nice to be able to share that. Phew. Okay. Game system's getting better. Still not there, but getting better. I think the next thing is plot. Story, setting, which may be a big ask. But anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it today. So have a nice day, and I'll see you next time.